Joining us today. I'm Nikki Irish, the Outreach and Education Coordinator of the DC Bar Lawyer Assistance Program. We're so glad you're here for what I hope and think is going to be a meaningful conversation. Before we dive in, a quick note and reminder that this program is for you and we want it to feel that way. So please use the chat throughout, share what's coming up for you, drop your questions, let us know you're there. And to get started, we thought we might ask everybody if they can to share one small thing that has brought you joy recently and just throw that in the chat and we'll each take note of it. But I also wanted to say something about why we chose this topic because I know even though you registered and showed up here today, some of you might have seen joy as a subject and wondered kind of really right now, right? Legal practice is demanding, the world is a lot. And joy can often feel maybe unattainable or a luxury or worse, like a dismissal of everything that is genuinely hard. But what we know from the research and what we hope to talk about in today's program, that joy isn't about ignoring the hard stuff. It's actually one of the most evidence-based tools we have for building resilience, for maintaining cognitive flexibility, and for sustaining ourselves through the long haul of a demanding career in life. And for attorneys especially, people who are trained to carry the weight of other people's hard moments, learning to notice and cultivate joy is protective, not indulgent. So today we're going to have an honest conversation about all things joy, and hopefully you'll walk away with at least one practical tool you can start to implement right away. Without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce our panelists who will guide us through this conversation. And Jesse, do you want to start us off?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessie Jokum. I'm the senior counselor, one of the senior counselors here at the Lawyer Assistance Program.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kirtana Kalavapudi, and I'm a attorney and trauma-informed yoga practitioner in the DMV area. Good to be here with you all.
Thank you both. Jesse, maybe we'll start with you. So when we talk about joy in hard times, right, the title, what do we actually mean? And just as importantly, what is joy not? Is joy not? Yeah.
Thanks, Nikki. Well, I guess the best way I can say it is joy is not this, those quick periods of happiness that we get because something good happened to us. Those are great. Not to say don't diminish those because small bursts of happiness are important. But joy is a deeper sense of well-being, purpose, and connection. It's those things that it's not the things that happen to us, but it's the things that provide us with a sense of purpose, connections to others, our community. And the more we work on building joy, it really helps manage that stress hormone that can happen. It really allows us to lower those cortisol and really increase those feel good hormones that we need. And it helps us build resiliency. Now, one thing you said is what it's not. Sometimes people have this misconception that if you're a joyful person, you're happy all the time, you're this go-lucky person, nothing impacts you. That is not joy. Probably one of the most powerful statement that I heard while preparing for this is that real joy makes space for all emotions. It's not about replacing sadness with happiness. So joy is not this toxic positivity because let's face it, bad things are going to happen to us. Life sucks sometimes. And guess what? We get to feel that. We get to say, this happened to me. I don't like it. It's making me feel this way. We don't have to run to it and try to find meaning in something bad that's happened to us. Sometimes bad things happen and there's no meaning to it. And that's okay. We get to feel those feelings now and work through them. Now, can we stay there? No, because that's not going to be healthy either. But we get to have some time and space to get through something bad that has happened to us and get to the other side and hopefully find a sense of reconnect with our sense of joy. And happiness. Joy and happiness is a little bit different also, in that happiness is fleeting. As I said, we're going to have quick periods of happiness, and those are important as well. But happiness sometimes is going to be having a great meal. Now, are you still going to be feeling that the next day? Probably not. But that in that moment, you're going to enjoy that. Or maybe a kiss from a loved one, to start your day. That's going to be great and fleeting. But what's going to give you joy is if you're able to reflect on the meaning of that connection, of that relationship, that relationship gives you with that loved one. That's going to give you a more longer sense of joy. So just recognize joy again. It's more internal. It's definitely going to be more sustained feeling. And it's just something that helps us long term deal with stress that's going to happen in life.
Thanks, Jesse. I'm gonna see if Kirtana, you want to jump in anywhere, but one of the things I want to comment in the chat is I noticed so much of it was about connection, like all the joys recently, right? Whether it was a connection with my dog or cats or my mother or my child, like it was a lot of it was around connection. Or like the present moment, right? Like enjoying kind of the long summer evenings or a new cafe. So I just kind of wanted to reflect what we were noticing in the chat.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. And I noticed that as well with the chat popping up. And yeah, to me, just to build off of what Jesse shared with everyone, joy is really relational, both to ourselves and then the folks around us. And I know that as an attorney and also the yoga practitioner myself, I find that they both roles, in addition to other roles that I have in my life right now, I'm able to navigate the lows, especially in those two roles, but understanding that if I can build a greater sense of community within my family unit, within my actual community, with colleagues and friends, when there are times that feel extremely low, I'm still able to look past that and zoom out and see, well, what additional connections or moments can I truly absorb as a way to experience and remind myself that joy is always within me as like an underlying current. So that's sort of how I've approached it, especially in the recent months and recent season.
Thank you for that. I wonder actually if you could talk a little bit more too, just kind of right that high stress professions like law, we know kind of both from a lived experience and a research-based experience that it has a positive impact. So I'm curious if you could speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that being an attorney and being in the legal profession, there's a lot of demands that are put on us. Many of us tend to be type A, natural problem solvers, really going above and beyond. And then depending on the practice of law that we're in, we may be working with clients that experience significant amount of stressors themselves that we then inadvertently absorb. And for me, I think that being able to recognize that those stressors don't necessarily negate from the joy that I can find in my moment, in another type of in the moment that I'm in. And so I really believe that it matters because it reminds us, to what Jesse was saying, that we can coexist with multiple type of emotions, right? The high stress environment that the legal profession is, but then also other moments that we are able to accrue throughout the day. For example, whether it's being able to walk your dog in the morning before your workday gets started. And it reminds us that as humans, we have all of these variety of emotions, and the folks that we work with may also come to the table with those variety of emotions. And so understanding ourselves and being able to give ourselves that moment to maybe pause, step back, and really reflect on, okay, that's full event happened. What can I do to maybe really process that by stepping back and asking myself, is this really going to define my entire day, or is this going to define my entire week? Or can I find that glimmer or that hope of, okay, well, I had a really great conversation, with a coworker about their family, or I had an excellent, walk with my dog in the morning, or I had a really great cup of coffee, and the barista at the coffee shop was, extremely friendly and little note on the side of the cup. And I think that when we start to look for those moments and give ourselves the opportunity to throughout our day, we can then start to better navigate the stressors of our profession.
And can you do all that without losing like your professional sharpness, right? Like I think a lot of times there's this perception, right?
Yeah.
Attorneys are trained to spot problems
Mhm.
and risks and really have that mindset. So can
Yeah.
I do that and still like be professionally sharp?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Nikki, and I think you can. Right, two things can be true at the same time. For me, as a yoga practitioner, of yoga and mindfulness has allowed me to show up with greater sense of clarity as an attorney, right? I'm not, for example, if I've had a really tough day and I will have the rest of my day to go, I will give myself 5-10 minutes to really center myself, find a quiet spot in the office or a focus room, for example, and then just really ground myself. And even just that 5 minutes can help me reset the trajectory of the rest of my day. And being able to gift ourselves that opportunity to reset then helps us not only understand what our internal landscape is looking, what feelings or emotions are coming up for us, and then being like, okay, I see you, I hear you, and I'd like to now give myself a chance to sort of steady the waves, go back into what I was doing, and be a little more focused. Be able to have a steady presence to whether meeting or tough conversation with a client, or even opposing counsel, right? I think that the more we give ourselves the opportunity to center ourselves, maybe do practice joy for a couple minutes, the more we remind ourselves that there's a greater landscape that's accessible to us. That's not just this one event that's happening in our day.
What I heard is really actually if I can have like this micro practice of joy, it can actually help me expand my kind of cognitive awareness and sharpness versus distract me from, right?
Mhm.
And so I'm gonna kind of take that because I think oftentimes we like intellectually know it. Yes, I intellectually know I can take 5 to 10 minutes in my day and ground myself, and then I will be a better person. But Jesse, I guess could you talk a little bit about because I think when people are under stress, feeling burnt out, maybe experiencing grief, that joy can feel inaccessible or inappropriate, and there's like resistance to it. So I guess maybe Jesse, could you kind of talk about that and how maybe somebody could work through it?
So I think it's a twofold thing. I think it's from a behavioral perspective and then also from a physiological perspective. The simple fact is when we are in a state of stress, burnout, or grief, our body then goes into survival mode. Okay. So unfortunately, during that period, it doesn't really prioritize pleasure. It really switches to again working ourselves, working through the situation that's causing us the stressors. So our nervous system really starts to release cortisol to really allow us to work through that. And often that means it's going to suppress those hormones that gets produced during joy, which is dopamine and serotonin. So on a physiological level, our body's completely going into survival, help us get through this. Joy gets put to the side. But the problem is that the same, again, while you said earlier that sometimes we intellectualize doing these small things, because we attorneys are going to say, well, no, I don't have time for this because I can do this many things in this 10 minutes that I can take that walk. But what happened is that 10 minutes that you can take that walk, it can actually start reducing that stress hormone that's being released and actually increase the good hormones that we need, which is going to allow you when you come back after that 10 minute to be able to do that. And again, from the behavioral perspective, we're always going to be able to say that I've done this before. I can push through this. Listen, let me just push through the next 10 minutes and then I'll take that break. But then After that 10 minute, we keep trying to push through it, not recognizing all we're doing is creating more stress on our body. Our body's not going to respond well, and not we're not performing the way we want to. So yes, can I push through this? Yes. But how productive am I going to be in that 10, 15 minutes I'm choosing to push through this? So it's just being able to, as I said, being able to recognize the resistance is yes, does it make sense for me to keep trying to work? Yes. But what can I get from this 10 minutes that I give myself?
Thank you, Jesse. I think that's really good. And I want to take that maybe a step further too, because I think sometimes the resistance, what we saw a lot in the registration, we kind of asked, right, what somebody wants to get out of this. And so much of what came up is, how can I feel joy, or why should I feel joy in the midst of all of this heaviness? There's so much heaviness in the world right now. Is is joy like this luxury or privilege? And how can I kind of give myself permission to access that? Is that even appropriate to give myself permission to access that? So I'm curious if
Yeah.
either of you want to speak to that.
I guess I'll start. I think we need to be okay with feeling two emotions at the same time. One does not discount the other. What's happening, the heaviness in the world, yes, it's happening. But that does not mean we're not allowed to feel the joy at the same time. And if anything, one helps us combat the other. We can acknowledge what the toll of everything that's happening, but also saying that, hey, engaging in these activities allows me to cope with the things that are happening in the world a little bit better.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. I agree with you. And want to remind folks that, but oftentimes, even in a demanding profession like the legal profession, just like all the other self care activities that feel really luxurious, know that those are something that we can gift ourselves, and seeking joy through connection, like I saw in or even through other types of micro moments, really gives us the opportunity to be able to recognize that, oh, yes, things are really stressful right now, or things feel really heavy. And it seems like, every time you open up your phone, something new is happening. Those things are all true. And how do we come back to ourselves, from a body and mind perspective? And if we are tasked with showing up for others in our profession, then to be able to do that, we need to be able to pour back into ourselves. So, that resistance, as Jesse mentioned, is very normal. And it might seem like seeking joy is something that might feel foreign to folks, or even, like you said, Nikki, a privilege. But really, I think that it's a fundamental right that we have as human beings to be able to, you know, soak in the small or not so small moments, and remind ourselves to, maybe smile or cry or laugh with a loved one or a friend.
Thank you for that, both of you. Um, let's talk a little bit, let's shift a little bit maybe in terms of kind of like talking about joy as a practice and kind of what that looks like in everyday life, and kind of how people maybe could begin cultivating like micro joys that feel more authentic kind of than forced.
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful question. I know connection was one way for folks to find joy right now. I know other micro joy examples include, for me, movement, and even service. So I know that when I start to feel disconnected, or when I start to notice that some of my heavier, I will say, low vibration, low frequency emotions tend to take precedent, I I pause and I notice that that's happening to me. And my antidote to that is one of three things, which is movement, whether that's going for a walk or a swim or a run, or service. I, truly get a lot of uh, joy and I feel a greater sense of gratitude when I'm able to connect with folks, such as this kind of event or volunteering in my local community. Being able to offer community yoga classes so that I can stay connected to the folks that I live around, and establish that greater sense of grounding and a greater sense of belonging. And then, of course, I know for some of us too, seeking either a spiritual or religious or a self-discovery path, right? I mean, there's so many incredible resources out there that allow us to zoom out and really understand how to cultivate joy in our day to day while we are navigating highs and lows or really incredible challenges. And so those are some examples that I have put to practice so that I can continue to show up and embrace the variety of emotions that I'm experiencing, but not forgetting that joy still exists.
Thank you. Go ahead,
And
Jessica.
can I add something? I think, you know, it may seem, especially if you haven't really done the work to really, as you said, to really be consistent with connecting with joy. One analogy I usually sometimes compare it to is like if you're trying like a new fitness or you're trying to eat healthier, you're not going to eat healthy one day a week and then all of a sudden, poof, I'm a healthy eater. Or you're not going to work out one time a week and say, hey, I'm a fitness expert. You're going to do things into place. You're going to develop a routine. You're going to do some practices so you can start eating healthier. And joy is no different than that. It's those small things that you do that's going to allow you to build more joy into your life. So I think that's sometimes it's a great analogy that I've used with people is if you're trying to eat healthier, if you're trying to become more physically fit, what are the practices that you have to implement? It's the same way where you want to approach joy.
Can I dig deeper on that and ask you like for something concrete, right? Like what
Mhm.
are there like specific examples of rituals or routines, which are different things, but rituals or
Yeah.
routines that can be helpful that can help you stop and notice like the shift or what is happening?
Mhm. I would say start with what's your morning routine looks like. Are you practicing maybe gratitude in the morning? Are you doing something grounding in the morning, whether it's take a morning walk, walking your dog, maybe just sitting outside of your patio or balcony, having a cup of coffee, listening to the sound of the city as it wakes up. So what are those small things that you're doing in your morning to kind of set yourself up for the day? And then as again, we can start our day here, but then maybe the first thing we're doing is we have a client meeting, or the first thing you're doing, you got to go to port house. So then your stress level starts to go up. What are you doing to kind of bring yourself down? Are you sitting down having lunch, or are you having lunch while you're typing a brief? Really think about what are those small things that you can do during the day, whether it is, okay, I'm going to eat lunch intentional away from my computer. My office has a little eating area, balcony area. Am I going to sit out and have lunch there? Am I going to go for a 10-minute walk before I have to go into this difficult client meeting?
I'm gonna, what was going through my head was all those things you're saying are just like the self-care people keep telling me to do. So what is the
Mhm.
difference though between that and joy and what does that look like and how can I pull that apart?
Yeah. The difference is it's connecting. It's connecting with not only our bodies, our senses to allow us to kind of ground ourselves. It's giving us a sense of purpose. And again, maybe it's the morning is routine is starting it with your partner. So you're automatically, I'm gonna start my day with connecting with someone. So it's a little bit more than self-care. It's connecting with your senses, connecting with nature, connecting with your loved ones.
Thank you. And thank you because I think it's important kind of to distinguish. And I think that kind of goes to this next question of like, how does mindfulness intersect with joy? Kirtana, if you want to.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. I know that there's so many definitions of mindfulness, and I'm sure that folks have come across their own version that really resonates with them. So I do want to sort of level set and share with folks that the definition that I've created and researched has been, being fully present with our thoughts, our emotions, our body sensations, both physical and emotional sensations in the present moment, and accepting them for what they are. And I do encourage folks and invite folks to recognize that doing that in and of itself is extremely courageous because it's much more easier for us to resist practicing mindfulness than it is to give ourselves that time and space to be able to really sit with ourselves, everything that's happening in our internal landscape. And so I have understood joy, noticing joy and cultivating joy to be a practice of mindfulness because when you are sitting down or even going for a moving meditation, right? Like walking or even running or swimming, something that has that repetitive motion can also be extremely soothing for our nervous system and our bodies. And so whatever mindfulness looks like for someone, being able to notice, okay, well, these are the thoughts that are coming through my mind. And I also noticing that I'm remembering this one really beautiful moment I had. And so you are able to recognize that all of these things are happening at once, whether it's the highs, so to speak, or the lows. You're then giving yourself that opportunity. Okay, wow, this is what's happening. I'm not changing how I feel. I'm simply noticing, acknowledging that they exist, and then giving myself both a greater sense of compassion because those sort of lows or those thoughts that don't seem as positive as one would maybe hope still exist because we're human, right? Like Jesse was saying earlier, we're not going to just shift from being sad all the way to happy. Like both of those can exist together. And so noticing joy to me is that practice of mindfulness and gifting ourselves that time and space to be able to reflect and choose how we want to move forward with those emotions. And maybe that's just allowing them to be there for a little bit and befriend those thoughts as we would a dear friend and say, hey, I'm here for you. Or we decide, okay, like I've been holding on to this thought or feeling for a really long time. Perhaps it's time for me to process it and slowly let go. And then, you're creating that space for maybe a little bit more of hope or joy or positivity.
I really like the piece about the noticing and kind of keep coming back to that, right? Because I think if we don't notice, then we're not really experiencing the joy fully, because that is part of the aspect of it. As you kind of were talking, I was like trying to think about joy recently, and like Saturday, I have two young kids, and like we were at the pool all day, and for the most of the day, I didn't pay attention to most of it, right? I was just parenting and being, but I had this moment at some point where I was like, I am sitting and I am reading a book, and my kids are in the pool, and I do not have to be with them. And it is sunny and it is lovely. And I like just for that moment, I was like, this is so delightful. And that was like 2 minutes out of about 5 hours, right? But it was like enough to be like, oh, this is like a really nice moment right now. And it's bringing me joy. And I had experienced the moment the entire day, but I didn't notice the feeling. Like I didn't spend time in the feeling, I guess, is almost. I think we can often do things, but if we're not noticing what it's giving us or not noticing the moment, um, it's it's tricky, I guess, in terms of joy. I want to take a moment because there was a good question in the chat about kind of Mindfulness, joy, and then like, what do you do about a mind racing, right? Like, maybe I'm having trouble noticing the joy or feeling the joy because I cannot get my mind to stop racing. So any thoughts on that?
So I would say, I think the first thing is kind of grounding yourself in that moment. So if you're able to kind of disconnect with what you're currently doing, especially if you're noticing your mind is just racing. So even if that means just pushing back away from your desk, turning away from the computer, leaving the room if you're able to, and utilizing some strategies to kind of ground yourself, your body, to kind of tell your body to calm down. Because as long as your body's feeling activated, those racing thoughts are going to continue. So it's maybe doing a breathing exercise like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Maybe it's doing some progressive relaxation exercises. Maybe it's doing some deep breathing. And then you can kind of be able to reconnect with your thoughts. Be able to touch on, okay, what is it that I was really anxious about? But I think the first thing first is starting off with calming your body, allowing your body to return to a place of safety.
Yeah, I would offer, the similar response. And, even if you have a chance to, you know, write something down to really be able to get out the thought that is maybe precipitating your mind to race. I've noticed that when I am able to write something down, it kind of exits my mind a little bit more faster than if I just let it sit in my mind and ruminate. And then also, yeah, like in the practice of yoga, there's a lot of pranayama or breath techniques, such as equal parts breathing or box breathing is an excellent way to really calm your nervous system down. I mean, even just 1 or 2 rounds of box breathing can really affect how anxious you're feeling, and allow your body to rest and digest and not feel like you're on a very fast treadmill.
Thank you both for that. It is, right? And what I would give permission to too is when we're talking about noticing joy and like micro joys, these are like moments we're noticing, right? They are not all day, every day, all the time. If you notice one micro joy a day, you're like doing great. Right, like Jesse said, you're not going from 0 to 60. We're just kind of trying to notice a little bit more because it increases like the resilience muscle, because it increases the capacity muscle. And the more you notice, the more you'll keep noticing. Um, and that's like the big piece too, right? I think about one of my closest friends is an attorney who has she notices all the negative things. And she knows that about herself, right? Like she's like, I know that is how I am wired. And it makes me very good at my job. Less good at being like a happy human being. So what within the changes in the past year or so, we have started, we try regular every day. We don't always nail it, but we try every day to like notice something from the day before that brought us a joy, like something very small. And it's not like the things I am deeply grateful for. It is, right? It is the barista had a fun flower on my coffee. It is I actually noticed my kids' laughter the other day and it was kind of delightful, right? It was, I got to sit on my porch with a coffee. Like they're small things, but it's the fact that now I have to tell her about them that actually forces me to notice them more. It's like this accountability of like, oh, let me start paying more attention because I haven't been paying that much attention. It's very easy for me to stay in a like go mode. So that for me and for her, I think that's actually been a really nice practice that we've been doing, and neither of us call each other out if we don't do it. So there's no shaming, but so thinking about any practices that like might be helpful is something to think about too. I want to connect to that anxiety question, like that mind racing question, right? So, because I think maybe Jesse, you could speak to this first, and then, but for someone who feels stuck or numb or disconnected or overly kind of anxious, um, Where is a realistic place to start?
I'm always going to stay with acknowledging. Okay. If you don't acknowledge you're feeling stuck or you're feeling anxious, you're going to keep moving as if, oh, this is my normal state of feeling. And if you do it enough time, it can become your normal state of feeling to a point where you don't recognize a relaxed state starts to feel uncomfortable as well. So I think it's definitely 4 months. Foremost, I'm always going to say acknowledge those feelings. And I think a lot of people say, well, I don't really know because I'm in a high stressful job. I don't really know. Our body is always giving us warning signals, whether it's a tightness in our shoulders, whether it is just a racing thoughts, we're getting signals from our bodies that we're feeling overwhelmed. I think sometimes we become accustomed to just ignoring those feelings because we feel like we have to meet this deadline. But again, that is not something we want to become accustomed to. So I think first, as I say, just the first is acknowledging. And then it's about what is one small thing that I can, once I've acknowledged I'm feeling stuck or I'm feeling overwhelmed, being able to take that step back. And when I take a step back, I'm not saying take a 30-minute break or something. It's just being able to ground myself, but also be able to when I come back during that grounding and it's calming my body down, is being able to identify what am I feeling stuck about? What am I feeling numb about? What is it about this situation that's bringing up some of these feelings for me? Because once we can figure out what is allowing us to feel that way, then we can say, okay, where can I start? What can I do to kind of address that feeling?
Also, thank you, Jesse. I also, maybe how do we also make space for the joy? And I think we've talked about this a little bit, but maybe
Mhm.
we can synthesize it. Kind of how do I make space for the joy and not minimize challenges, right? Like, how do I hold both those? Like, if I'm not used to doing that, like, how do I make space to do that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's reframing our perspective is, oh, sorry. Did you want to take that one? Okay. I think it's kind of making space for the perspective of instead of seeing joy as indulgent or that it's taken away from this thing, how can seeking joy or leaning into joy can help me with that challenging thing? So how can that joyful moment that I'm giving myself to connect with a colleague in the moment or connect with a friend or watch a short video, how can that allow me to really ground myself, but also how can it then allow me to be more productive in the 10, 15 minutes I'm going to come back to that activity? So if we see it in not as something that's taken away, but something that's going to aid me, we might be more inclined to lean into that joyful activity.
I really like that. Thank you. It made me think I was having a conversation the other day with a friend who they're gonna have to put their dog down. She's 16 and terminal. And they were kind of right. It's hard. And they have a 9-year-old who's like never not known this dog. And we were just talking about like, right, next steps. But one of the things we were talking about is like they're gonna do like a last sup, like a last dinner, right? Like what is this fun, joyful thing we can do for Maddie that like we're gonna have a hamburger and she's gonna have these fun like treats and it will be something very joyful in this moment of deep sadness. And so it's the ability to like have a moment of connection in the midst of something that will be significant loss. And that I think to me right there is kind of that piece of the joy is actually helping with the grief and the loss or kind of making it acute in a way that like makes it manageable or meaningful maybe. Yeah. Here's a question all right. So we talked about high frequency versus low frequency emotions. I've heard these terms, but don't know the meaning. So maybe Kirtana, if you can talk a little bit about what kind of, from your perspective, what that means for emotions.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that question. Um, So from my perspective, both doing the work as a yoga practitioner, but then also in my own healing journey and mental health journey, my therapist actually had recommended to me to label my emotions using high frequency and low frequency so that there's less stigma associated with positive and negative emotions because all emotions are valid, right? I mean, Jesse has shared this throughout today's session. And you don't want to further judge yourself for having certain emotions that maybe aren't popular to talk about, but they're still valid, right? Especially depending on what life experiences you've had that have maybe reminded you to bring them to the surface and really process them. And so for me, some of the higher frequency emotions, tend to be that help me feel elevated, help me bring my best self. They joy tends to be a high frequency emotion for me. So does laughter and I would say, contentment, that difference again, right, between happiness and contentment slash joy. And then some of the lower frequency emotions for me, especially, are anger, sadness, frustration, a sense of unfairness, right? Things that I have compartmentalized away because I was like, oh no, I'll just deal with those later. And when they do bubble up to the surface, I have reminded myself, and my therapist has reminded me to not label that they're coming up to the surface. Whether it's the timing of them might be inconvenient, but that's okay, right? To be able to honor that they're coming up to the surface and making space for them, and then figuring out how am I going to process them? And so that's how I've approached designating or characterizing my emotions.
Did you have something you want to add, Jesse?
No, I'd say I just like that, especially the perspective of just not judging your
Yeah.
emotions, and just the reframing. Because you're right, all emotions are good. So it was just, yeah, just a lovely way to frame that.
Just data, right? Emotions are data points. It's our choice what we do with them. They're telling us something. Related to that, maybe, Jesse, how do we differentiate between kind of normal emotional strain in our challenge to access joy versus something that maybe requires deeper support, such as kind of a depression or significant burnout, and kind of why and how should we distinguish between those two?
So I think the number one thing is really to think about is the differential is consider the frequency and the severity. As we kind of mentioned earlier, and we've just been talking about it, during stressful situations, yes, there's going to be times where connecting with joy is going to be harder because our body's going into that survival mode. But even after or even during the stressful time, when you are just feeling just maybe a little bit burned out, a little bit stressed, you are able to find a way to kind of reconnect with our joy, or when the entire stressful situation has passed, we are able to connect with joy. Now, when it gets to that point of a deeper depression and burnout, even after the stressful situation or whatever is the triggering event has passed, we still can't connect with joy. We still are stuck in this feeling of just a low mood, just feeling stagnant, just not finding a sense of purpose. Connection becomes harder because, again, we just do not feel that connection. That's where it's a little bit deeper than just not having enough joy in our lives. Now we're going into that depressed state because even after those situations, joy just seems so far away. And getting help, should you once you notice that, it could just be talking with a friend. Sometimes our first step to get help is just talk with people that we already feel safe around. So maybe it's just talking with a loved one saying, I just been feeling like this and I can't shake it and I don't know why. Or it may just be then maybe it's talking with a leader that you trust or again, reaching out to us at the Lawyer Assistance Program.
Thanks, Jesse. Just an important distinction, right? We're talking a lot about joy and how to access joy, and it's recognizing if at some point it just feels insurmountable. I cannot access this. I'm not able to notice it. Or I notice a moment and I feel like I should be feeling the joy and I'm just not. It is important to talk to somebody about, and maybe it is a moment or maybe it is something bigger, but there's no need to kind of walk that alone. Um, so thank you for kind of pinpointing that. I've kind of one wrap-up question, but before we get there, one, I want to make sure if anybody has questions, throw them in the chat. I will ask. The panels, one of the things I think we didn't talk about was kind of you're noticing joys in your day, but are there like practices of just like great hobbies, interests, like things that we cultivate for ourselves that are not our work identity, that can be related to joy? And I'd be curious if you could speak to those a little bit. And then related to that question, I'm going to ask the people attending in the chat, maybe throw things that are hobbies, interests, etc., that do bring them joy and that they intentionally like cultivate because there is joy in knitting, coloring, art, music, whatever the thing is for them. So everybody has a little bit of homework right now. Maybe Kirtana, you want to start, and then we'll go to Jesse.
Sure, that's such a great question. I will say that one of the hobbies that has allowed me to cultivate joy has been baking sourdough bread. So I am about 5 years late to the sourdough bread party. I did not take it up in 2020 like many folks did. That's okay, I'm a late bloomer. Fully accept that. But I have noticed just how incredible of a connection I've built with my neighbors because I have gifted loaves of bread to them. Had a new baby, or they had a tough week, and we've I've gifted starter to folks, and then we've been exchanging these. And there's something about my Saturday morning routine where I feed my starters. Saturday evening / Sunday morning is when I make the loaves, and then I gift them out and as well make some for us. And so that to me has been an incredible way to step away from my phone, step away from things for a little bit, and just re in the moment, making bread.
I love that. That's a great example. I'm going to actually, Jesse, before you, I'm going to piggyback on that because one of the questions is how do I tell I am experiencing joy? So for you, right, like your whole face lit up actually, like when you were just talking about the sourdough. But I'm curious for you, how do you like notice that is a thing that is bringing you joy?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. For me, it's being able to witness just how different my mood is, how I show up for myself, show up for my spouse and son, and when I notice that I bring a greater sense of energy and I'm able to be patient even if it's really tantrums, which we're still experiencing in my household, and extending that compassion, extending that grace to the person, even if I'm like, wow, okay, that was such a minor thing that's really upset you. To me, when I'm able to feel really steady and bring a greater sense of energy to the folks around me, that's when I know, okay, like all of my practices that I have put in place to cultivate joy, to maintain steadiness are working.
That was great. Thank you. And I think that kind of connects to Jesse. You put an answer into the chat, right? Of like, what is the difference between joy and happiness? And I think something you just both of you kind of talked about is essentially this deeper sense, right, of well-being, purpose, connection. It's not the thing happening to us. It is not in like a fleeting emotion. It's like something deeper and rooted. And the deeper and rooted is almost kind of how I'm visualizing it. So I appreciate that. Jesse, is there anything else you kind of wanted to add into this piece?
No, I think the one thing I would emphasize is that, it's just, as you kind of spoke to it, is joy can carry us a little bit longer than happiness is. As I said, you can have moments of happiness and then within an hour, something can happen versus joy. And again, not to say again, as we said earlier, it's not like you're going to be joyful for happiness, but you're going to think about that moment and it's going to bring you a sense of calm and purpose versus a sense of happiness, maybe just in that moment you feel that sense of happiness and it passes.
Thanks, Jesse. And how about any thoughts or insights related to kind of the cultivating self outside of work? Anything you've noticed, like with clients or things that have been helpful or not helpful?
Yeah. I would say number one is movement. I think, I know we say it all the time, but being able to connect with our body, and again, no matter what the movement is, if you're someone who likes weight training, if you're someone who likes yoga, if you're someone who likes Pilates, but being able to connect with our bodies, as much as we sometimes talk our way out of it, we got to remember what we feel afterwards. Just a sense of just, I just did this. I just really pushed my body, but it also allows to release some things and bring again those good feeling hormones. So I would say as much as we can is getting movement and just being in the moment. It's not about getting through whatever it is that movement, but it's about connecting with your body during the process.
Thank you both for that. I saw a couple people's responses and appreciate those. So if anybody else wants to kind of throw out what they do for themselves, it's I think always helpful to learn from each other. And sometimes we're doing things that we don't always notice is actually like a practice of joy, or if we notice it in a different way, it could be joy related. And seeing what other people are doing, I think sometimes helps with that. But as a kind of final question, maybe kind of what is a key takeaway or insight that you would want to share with the audience? Kirtana, we'll start with you, and then Jesse, I'll go back to you.
Thanks, Nikki. Yeah. The one takeaway I would offer to folks is that joy is a practice. So you have to keep coming back to yourself and really figuring out what feels most authentic to you. So if baking bread doesn't feel authentic to you, don't force yourself to keep doing it, right? It's a trial and error. And that's I sort of have adopted that from my yoga practice, which is it's an opportunity to keep coming back to yourself and to see what really helps you feel more stable and easeful and recognize that that sense of joy will always be within you. It's just a matter of, peeling back the layers and knowing that it's there.
And the one thing I would say is I think all of us said it here. Joy is not a privilege. It is a right. And joy really serves us. Um, Not only on the perspective of personally, but it really does help people on a professional level if they can connect with joy. They are a better human, they are a better professional. So joy is not just this thing that once I'm done with my workday, I'll try to find my joy. It doesn't work that way. Joy should be something we should be always seeking throughout our day. We may push it aside due to high stressful moments, but try to reconnect with it as soon as you can. So I would encourage anyone if they are struggling with how to find joy and they don't know whether they're at that burnout, depression, or just maybe at a stuck stage, again, reach out to us. Sharon will put our contact information in the chat. And then I also encourage everyone here is what is one practice that they can start implementing to bring more joy into their lives?
I appreciate that. And thank you both for those responses. I'm going to reflect a little bit of chat just because it's fun to, right, see. Somebody started reading like romance novels this year, right? Like vastly different from legal work. Like it's a shift, a mindset shift, which can be lovely. And you always know it's going to work out in the end. So, right, there's joy in that. And then playing tennis and kind of that social, there's like physical, but like also that social connection to other people, which can be really powerful. And then somebody just talked about joy is the feeling you get when something kind of like makes you smile, right? Or amazes you. I think that's a lot of times why like nature is often connected to joy because there can be just some like all about nature. It's like a practice I have. My 10-year-old is really into animals, but we downloaded the Merlin app, which identifies bird sounds. So like you can, it's like yeah, you just like record the bird sound and then it tells you what kind of bird it is. And like the joy he gets from being like, that is a finch. And I'm like, I would never have been able to identify it, right? But like there's like this joy in like identifying this bird, right? So it's for you. What is your kind of like little thing that just lights you up a little bit? It's good to know and be able to cultivate that. But like Jesse said, if that is hard, don't walk the path alone. Ask for help, whether it is here, whether it is a friend, whether it is a spiritual person, whether like whatever your place is that you are most comfortable asking for help.